Okay, let's unpack this. We're deep diving into probably the oldest, most consequential saying in all of real estate.
Hmm.
You can change the house, you can fix it up, repaint it, whatever, but you can never change the location.
That's absolutely right. It's the one thing that's fixed.
And the pressure of picking the right place is just immense because, well, for most of us, that decision, it basically defines our lifestyle, our financial future, maybe even our kids' opportunities for decades sometimes.
It really does.
Yeah.
And when you choose a neighborhood, you're not just looking at, the nice trees or the park down the street today. You're sort of inheriting, well, decades of forces that are often invisible. Historical forces, political decisions, financial structures.
Right, the stuff that actually made the neighborhood what it is.
Exactly. And those same forces are likely to dictate where it's going in the future.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We want to go way beyond just curb appeal or, the latest school ratings.
Mhm.
We're digging into some fascinating sources. Urban history, property finance, even sociology to try and give you a really complete framework. A way to assess a location's, let's say, long-term health and whether it actually fits you.
So you can look past that one perfect house maybe and see the whole community, see if it works for the long haul.
Yeah, look at it like an informed historian and maybe even a bit like a financial analyst, not just someone buying a house. Okay, so to understand the neighborhoods we see today, especially in America, we really have to rewind a bit. We need to understand how our cities grew and maybe more importantly, how they broke out of their old constraints.
Yeah, before the late 1800s, cities were, well, compact. You walked everywhere. We often call it the walking city era.
Because you had to. Everything needed to be close because travel was basically limited by how fast you could walk or maybe a slow horse-drawn cart.
But then, bam, between roughly 1888 and 1918, everything changed. The electric streetcar arrived.
And this wasn't just a small improvement, it was revolutionary, right?
Yeah. Totally revolutionary. These streetcars, they ran on tracks radiating out from the city center, the business districts, and they could move up to maybe 14 miles per hour.
Which sounds slow to us now, obviously.
Of course. But compared to walking or horses, it was 4 times faster. Suddenly, you could live much, much farther from where you worked.
So that speed, even 14 miles an hour, it completely redrew the map of the city.
It did. It basically tripled the amount of land that was suddenly practical for people to live on, way beyond that old walking city boundary.
Okay, but here's the kicker, right? This new land, this first wave of sort of proto-suburbs, it wasn't evenly settled.
Not at all. That's the crucial consequence. This new suburban ring, it almost immediately became segregated.
How so?
Well, think about it. Distance now meant travel time, and crucially, it meant paying a fare for the streetcar.
Oh, okay.
Cost and time. And that started sorting people out. If you had the money for the fare and the time for the commute, you could move further out. If you didn't, you stayed closer in. It created this layering, almost, based on class and economic function, right from the start.
So the seeds of suburban segregation were planted way back then with the streetcar.
Absolutely. And then that initial pattern got sort of turbocharged by the next big thing, the automobile.
Right, the car. Though it wasn't instant, was it?
No, not at all. The streetcar was the real initial revolution. The car, well, it took a while to catch on for commuting. It was kind of a novelty at first, maybe until after World War I even.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere that even as late as, 1934? In a major city like Pittsburgh, more workers still walked to their jobs than drove.
That's a powerful stat, isn't it? It shows how gradual that shift was. But eventually, the car's flexibility, that perceived freedom, it won out.
Especially by the 1920s, 30s, and then definitely after World War II.
Oh, absolutely. Post-WWII, the car completely reoriented everything. It allowed people to work in factories or offices popping up on the edges of the city, maybe without ever needing to go downtown at all.
Which further pulled people outwards,
Yeah.
right? Decentralizing not just where people lived, but where they worked, too.
Exactly. You see it really clearly in the growth patterns of places like, say, South Orange in New Jersey. It had this huge growth spurt in the 1920s, directly tied to this new car-enabled accessibility.
But this whole outward movement, this rise of the suburbs, it wasn't just people choosing freely, was it? There were structures pushing it along, often intentionally.
Oh, definitely. We have to talk about the government's role, particularly federal policies after World War II, that really cemented residential segregation. It wasn't just accidental.
You're talking about things like the FHA.
Yes, the Federal Housing Administration, the FHA, and also the VA, the Veterans Administration. These agencies were crucial because they ensured the mortgages that allowed millions of returning soldiers and families to buy homes.
But they didn't insure them everywhere equally.
No. And this is critical. They used something called the FHA's underwriting manual. And that manual wasn't subtle. It laid out an explicit racial policy.
This is where the term redlining comes from, isn't it?
It is. The manual basically instructed appraisers to downgrade neighborhoods if they were racially integrated or even if they were near minority neighborhoods. They labeled these areas as higher risk.
Which meant the FHA wouldn't insure mortgages there.
Exactly. Effectively cutting off the flow of affordable financing to integrated or minority communities.
And there are famous examples of this, right? Like Levittown.
Levittown is a stark case. William Levitt built these huge suburban developments, but he famously refused to sell to black families like Vince Meriday. And it wasn't just his personal prejudice, although that was there.
It was backed by policy.
It was underpinned by federal policy. If Levitt had decided to sell homes to black families, the FHA and VA would likely have refused to insure the mortgages for any homes in that development.
Wow. So the government was essentially mandating segregation if developers wanted access to those crucial federal subsidies.
That's precisely what happened. And it locked in segregation across almost every metropolitan area in the country for decades. It's a huge reason for the wealth gap we still see today.
And it wasn't just the feds. Local governments had their tools too, right? Like zoning.
Yes, exclusionary zoning. This became a really powerful tool for essentially keeping lower-income families out of newly developing middle-class neighborhoods.
How did that work specifically?
The main tactic was to zone land only for single-family homes, often requiring large minimum lot sizes.
Ah, so no apartment buildings, no duplexes, no townhouses.
Exactly. By banning those more affordable types of multifamily housing, you instantly drive up the cost of living there. You limit the housing supply and make it impossible for families without significant income to move in, regardless of their race.
So it was primarily an economic barrier, though obviously it had racial impacts too.
It was very effective as an economic barrier. It's worth noting, though, that legally, these ordinances couldn't stop a middle-class African-American family, for instance, from buying a single-family home if they could afford it. But it effectively blocked widespread economic integration.
Okay, so fast forward to more recent times, we've seen these historical patterns start to, well, almost reverse in some ways, haven't we? This idea of the great inversion.
Yes, it's a really significant shift. For, 50, 60 years, the classic American dream involved moving up the economic ladder and moving out to the suburbs.
Right. Success meant a bigger house further out.
But that pattern is flipping. Now we're seeing millions of people, often with good jobs, high earning power, or significant savings, choosing to live in central cities instead of distant suburbs.
They're drawn by the density, the amenities, maybe shorter commutes.
All of that. And it's driving up demand and prices in those core urban areas.
But there's a flip side to that coin, isn't there? If wealthier people are moving in, what's happening to lower income residents?
That's the other side of the inversion. Poverty is migrating outwards. The challenges that used to be associated mainly with inner cities are increasingly found in the suburbs.
Is there data on that?
Oh, yeah. U.S. Census data from the 2000s showed a really striking trend. Poverty actually increased by something like 53% in the nation's suburbs during that first decade.
53%? Wow. Compared to cities.
Compared to about a 26% increase in central cities during the same period. So the rate of increase was much faster in the suburbs.
So the geography of poverty is shifting.
It is. And this whole process tends to solidify economic segregation, especially in the most economically successful metro areas, the ones with lots of high-tech jobs, the creative class hubs.
What's the connection there?
There's a very high correlation. Research shows that the overall economic segregation index, a measure of how separated rich and poor residents are, is highest in these booming, wealthier metros.
So, ironically, more economic success in a region can lead to greater separation between income groups.
It seems to. The economic sorting becomes more intense. The poor get pushed further away from opportunity hubs, making it even harder to climb the economic ladder in those places.
Yeah.
And that's something really important to consider when you're looking at a neighborhood. What are the broader economic trends in the metro area, and how is this sorting playing out? It affects the long-term stability and social health of a place.
Okay, so we've got this background, these huge historical and economic forces shaping where neighborhoods are and who lives in them. But now let's zoom in. You're actually standing on a street corner in a neighborhood you're considering. How do you gauge its its character, its livability, the actual feel of the place.
Yeah, this is where you move from the macro to the micro. And for this, I think the ideas of the urbanist Jane Jacobs are still incredibly relevant, even decades later.
She wrote The Death and Life of Great American Cities, right? A
A
classic.
total classic.
Mm.
And her core argument was about diversity. She believed that vibrant, safe, interesting city life absolutely depends on diversity of uses, not homogeneity.
Meaning not just houses.
Exactly. Yeah. For a street or a district to really work, she argued, the primary use, usually dwellings, where people live, needs to be supplemented by other primary uses. Places where people work, places for entertainment, maybe community centers, shops, different things bringing different people to the area at different times.
Why was that so important to her?
It was about safety and vitality, driven by eyes on the street.
Mm.
If you have a mix of uses, you have people coming and going throughout the day and evening for different reasons. Residences bring people out in the morning and evening. Offices bring people during the day. Restaurants and theaters bring people at night.
So the area is never deserted.
Right. There's always activity, always people around, which makes it feel safer and more interesting. Homogeneity, on the other hand, she saw as dangerous. A purely residential street is dead during the workday. A purely office district is a ghost town after 6 p.m.
And she warned about superficial differences too, didn't she?
Yes. She argued that if an area has a fundamental sameness of use, like mile after mile of just office buildings, the only way businesses or buildings can try to stand out is through superficial means.
Like weird architecture or flashy signs.
Exactly. She pointed to Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles as an example. Back then, she called it a chaos of shouted but superficial differences. All these buildings trying desperately to look unique, but underlying it all was just the same basic function, which she found boring and ultimately lifeless.
She mentioned Cleveland's Euclid Avenue too, I think. Changing from one kind of sameness to another didn't help.
Right, just swapping old homogeneity for new homogeneity doesn't create genuine urban vitality. For those supplementary uses, the shops, the offices, the cafes, to really contribute, Jacob stressed they have to make intensive use of the land.
Intensive use. What does that mean practically?
It means the activity needs to draw a good number of people relative to the space it occupies. A giant warehouse, for example, might take up a huge amount of land but only have a handful of workers inside. That's not intensive use in her view. It doesn't bring enough people to add to the street life.
So you want businesses and activities that pack people in, relatively speaking.
Yes, things that generate foot traffic, activity, reasons for people to be there at various times.
Mm.
So when you're assessing a neighborhood, ask yourself, is the mix of uses real and deep? Does it bring people here throughout the day? Or is it just, a few shops sprinkled into a mostly residential area that feels dead most of the time?
That's a great lens. Beyond the use mix, what about the buildings themselves? The architecture must tell a story, right?
Oh, absolutely. The architecture is like a physical history book of the neighborhood.
Yeah.
It gives you so many clues about when it was built, how quickly it grew, the economics of the time, even the aspirations of the people who first lived there.
Can you give some examples, like early American styles?
Sure. Think about the very earliest colonial houses, like those modeled on English thatched roof cottages. They often had these incredibly steep roofs,
Why so steep?
originally to hold thatch and shed water effectively. But thatch didn't work well in the North American climate, so it quickly got replaced with wooden shingles or shakes. But the steep roof form often remained. The designs were generally simple, maybe dominated by a massive central chimney. It speaks to practicality, available materials, maybe a certain austerity.
Okay, so function driving form. But later styles seem more expressive.
Definitely. As wealth grew and architectural pattern books spread, styles emerged that were specifically chosen to evoke a certain feeling or status. Take the Swiss cottage style.
Complete.
It was meant to. It was often recommended for scenic spots like mountain valleys, for people who like the wild and picturesque. The designs were intentionally irregular, asymmetrical, meant to look romantic, and blend with nature.
And the Italian villa style. I've seen houses with those towers.
Right. The Italian villa became hugely popular, heavily promoted by influential designers like Andrew Jackson Downing in the mid-19th century. He loved the irregular villa, the bold roof lines, maybe a prominent tower or campanile, shady porches and balconies.
Why irregularity?
Downing believed irregularity was key to awakening emotions. He thought it made a house look more picturesque, more beautiful, suggesting the owner had refined taste, maybe traveled, had a certain cultural sophistication and wealth.
So architecture became a way to signal status and aspiration, importing European ideas.
Very much so. It shifted from just building shelter to building a statement.
But not all later styles were about high design, were they? Some seemed more about trends or maybe confusion.
That's a good way to put it.
Hmm.
The sources mention postmodern architecture from the later 20th century. Sometimes it just felt like a jumble of trendy cliches, odd shapes, pastel colors, maybe stripes, all kind of tacked onto a basic boxy structure.
A bit superficial, like the Wilshire Boulevard problem.
Kind of, yeah. A desire for novelty, maybe, without a strong underlying design principle. Or think about the neoclassical revival that popped up again later.
Like those big houses with the two-story white columns out front.
Exactly. They were referencing the grand mansions of the early 19th century, trying to evoke that sense of history and stability. But often the proportions were off, the details were simplified or clumsy. The sources call them inept reflections sometimes.
Like mass production trying to copy a historical style on the cheap.
That's often how it came across. It tells you something about the economics and aspirations of that particular building boom.
And sometimes the basic structure itself is the clue, right? Like how close the houses are.
Absolutely. Density and width tell a huge story. You look at older parts of cities like Brooklyn or Philadelphia, and you see entire neighborhoods built with houses on lots less than 25 feet wide, often attached brick row houses.
Compared to earlier detached wooden houses on bigger lots.
Right. That shift tells you land values shot up. Density pressures increased intensely. It fundamentally changes the feel of the street, how neighbors interact, the whole community dynamic. The difference between a neighborhood of sprawling villas and one of narrow row houses is a stark economic and social contrast, written in brick and mortar. What's fascinating here is that, okay, we have this rich understanding now of the history, the social fabric, the architectural clues, but we have to connect that macro understanding to the nitty-gritty of actually assessing a specific property.
Right, because whether you're buying a place to live or as an investment, the numbers have to work. The long-term financial health of that decision is just critical.
It's paramount. And the sources really hammer this home. Priority number one, especially for investors, but really for anyone, should be finding a great deal.
Which means not just paying whatever the asking price is.
Absolutely not. It means you need a solid grasp of property valuation.
Yeah.
You need to look at it almost like a forensic accountant.
Okay, so how do you do that? For income properties especially, what's the key metric?
The cornerstone is net operating income, or NOI. You absolutely have to understand this.
Define that for us.
Sure. NOI is simply the property's total income rent, maybe laundry fees, whatever, minus all of its operating expenses. Things like property taxes, insurance, maintenance, management fees, utilities if the landlord pays them.
But not the mortgage payment.
Critically, not the mortgage payment, or debt service as it's called. NOI is calculated before debt. It tells you about the property's profitability based purely on its operations.
Okay, so you calculate the NOI. How does that help you figure out what the property is worth?
Once you have a realistic NOI, you can estimate the property's value by applying something called a capitalization rate, or cap rate.
Cap rate. I hear that term thrown around a lot. What is it exactly?
The cap rate is basically the rate of return an investor would expect to get on a property if they bought it with all cash. It's the NOI divided by the property's market value or purchase price. So value, NOI, cap rate.
Okay, so it connects income to value. How do you use it?
It's a crucial comparison tool. And the relationship is inverse. A higher cap rate means a lower estimated value for a given NOI, and vice versa.
Wait, run that by me again. Higher cap rate, lower value. That seems counterintuitive.
Think of it this way. The cap rate reflects the market's perception of risk and return. If a property has a high cap rate, it means you're getting more income for every dollar you invest in its value. You pay less relative to the income it generates.
Okay. So a high cap rate might mean the market sees it as riskier or maybe in a less desirable area, so you have to offer a better return, higher cap rate, to attract buyers.
Exactly. Lower cap rates where you pay more per dollar of income are typically found in very stable, high-demand, low-risk neighborhoods or property types. Think prime location, solid tenants. Higher cap rates might be in areas with more economic uncertainty, higher vacancy rates, or properties that require more intensive management.
So the cap rate itself tells a story about the location and the asset.
A big story. If you see a property listed with a cap rate that seems way higher than other similar properties in the area, it could be a sign of an amazing deal, or it could be a red flag that there's a hidden problem the market is already pricing in. That's the puzzle you need to solve during due diligence.
Okay, NOI and cap rate focus on the property itself. What about my investment? How do I measure my personal return?
That's where another key metric comes in, cash-on-cash return. This one does factor in your financing.
How's it calculated?
It compares the property's cash flow before taxes,
Mm,
which is basically NOI minus your debt service, to the actual amount of cash you invested out of pocket. Your down payment, your closing costs, maybe initial repair costs.
so it's interim expenses, mortgage payment, my cash investment.
Essentially, yes, expressed as a percentage,
And why is this so important?
because it tells you how hard your specific cash is working for you. You could have two identical properties with the same NOI and cap rate. But if you buy one with a small down payment, high leverage, and the other with a large down payment, low leverage, your cash-on-cash returns can be wildly different, assuming they both cash flow positively.
Right. More leverage can juice your return on the cash you put in, but probably adds risk too.
Precisely. Cash-on-cash helps you compare different deal structures and leverage strategies. Maybe a high-leverage deal in an area you expect to appreciate quickly makes sense, even if the cap rate isn't amazing. Or maybe you prefer the lower but potentially safer return of a low-leverage purchase in a super stable area. It focuses on your capital.
Okay, so financial analysis is key. But then there's the actual building. You mentioned due diligence. Where do you start physically?
You start at the bottom. The foundation. The source is called foundation inspection, cheap insurance.
And it probably is, compared to the cost of fixing it.
Oh, absolutely. A foundation inspection might cost a few $100s, maybe $50 on a small property in some contexts. A major foundation repair, that can easily run into the tens, even hundreds of thousands.
So what are you looking for? Or rather, what should the expert you hire be looking for?
You need a licensed structural engineer or foundation specialist. They'll check for major cracks, signs of uneven settling, bowing walls, water damage in the basement or crawl space. And crucially, they need to assess for wood rot or termite damage in the structural members, like sill plates and joists, especially where they meet the foundation.
And if they find major problems?
If the expert comes back with estimates for significant structural repairs, the advice is usually pretty blunt. Unless you are getting an absolutely massive discount specifically to cover that cost and risk, you should probably walk away. Minor manageable repairs are one thing. A compromised foundation is a potential nightmare.
Okay, foundation first. What's next? Moving up.
The roof. It's your primary defense against the elements. And for typical asphalt shingle roofs, there are some clear visual signs of aging or failure you can look for, even yourself initially.
Like what?
Look for shingles that have bare spots where the little ceramic granules have worn off. Those granules protect the asphalt from UV damage.
Okay, bald spots are bad.
Very bad. Also look for significant discoloration or bleaching across the roof surface. And check the gutters. If you see a ton of those granules collecting in the gutters, that means they're coming off the roof and it's nearing the end of its life.
What about curling or missing shingles?
Definitely look for those. Curling edges or corners, or obviously missing shingles, indicate either aging, wind damage, or maybe poor installation initially.
And maintenance plays a big role too, right?
Huge. Anything that prevents water from shedding quickly off the roof will shorten its lifespan. Piles of leaves, clogged gutters, overhanging tree branches, dropping debris, all that stuff traps moisture and accelerates decay. A well-maintained older roof can often be in better shape than a neglected newer one. Okay, foundation, roof. These are big physical checks. But maybe the most critical piece of due diligence happens before you're even fully committed, right? The legal side.
Absolutely crucial. You need to do your legal homework, and you need to know the results before you are legally bound to buy the property.
So how do you ensure that?
Your purchase offer must include contingencies, specifically a due diligence contingency that covers inspections, financing, appraisal, and very importantly, a title search.
And that contingency is your escape hatch.
It's your safety net. It gives you a specific period to investigate everything.
Yeah.
If you uncover major problems, structural issues, title clouds, financing falling through, that contingency allows you to legally back out of the deal and get your deposit money back. Without it, you could be forced to buy a lemon or forfeit your deposit.
So what are you looking for in that title search? You're looking for anything that could cloud the title, meaning anything that might prevent the seller from transferring clear, undisputed ownership to you. This includes things like existing mortgages or home equity lines of credit that haven't been paid off, unpaid property tax liens, liens from contractors, mechanics liens, or judgments against the owner.
All that needs to be cleared before closing.
Yes, or accounted for in the closing statement, usually paid off with the seller's proceeds. You also want to ensure there are no unexpected easements or restrictions on the property that weren't disclosed.
Is there anything particularly alarming you might find?
One big red flag is finding a recorded notice of default, or lis pendens.
What does that mean?
It means a lender has formally started the foreclosure process against the current owner because they've defaulted on their mortgage payments.
Oh.
Yeah. Buying a property already in foreclosure is a much more complex and risky process. Unless you're specifically experienced in distressed properties and have expert legal help, finding a notice of default during due diligence is usually a sign to proceed with extreme caution, or maybe just walk away.
Okay, this is a lot to check. Financials, physical structure, legal title. It sounds like you need a good team.
You absolutely do. And beyond your formal team, your inspector, your lawyer, your agent, the sources stress the importance of knowledge and networking. You can't know everything yourself.
So talk to people.
Talk to lots of people. Don't let pride stop you from asking questions. Ask experienced property managers in the area about common problems they see in rentals there. Ask contractors about typical repair costs for houses of that age and type in that neighborhood. Ask other investors what worries them about the local market right now.
Where do you find these people?
Local real estate investing clubs or associations are often fantastic resources. They're places to meet experienced folks, find potential team members, good agents, reliable contractors, knowledgeable lenders, and just generally get a feel for the current pulse of the market, what strategies are working, what pitfalls to avoid. Learning from others' mistakes is way cheaper than making them all yourself.
All right, so you've done the deep dive. You've analyzed the history, the character, the physical condition, the legal status, the financials. Now you need to think strategically about how this specific location fits into your broader goals, whether that's building wealth or just finding a stable place to live.
Right, and every location kind of exists on a spectrum. On one end, you might have what the sources call an affordable haven, a place designed for stability. On the other end, you have locations that become targets for intense speculation.
And the example given for this contrast is really interesting. Stuyvesant Town and Peter Cooper Village in New York City.
Yeah, it's a fascinating case study. It was built right after World War II, largely by MetLife Insurance Company, but with significant city involvement.
And the goal wasn't maximizing profit, was it?
No, the stated goal was to create an inner-city oasis. It was explicitly designed to provide decent, affordable housing for returning veterans and middle-class families. The aim, as one source put it, was no rich people and no poor people, just stability.
And the city really helped make that happen, didn't they?
It did. The city used eminent domain, a pretty powerful government tool to assemble the land, clearing an old gas house district. And crucially, they granted MetLife a 25-year property tax freeze on the development.
Wow, a tax freeze for 25 years, that's huge.
It was massive. It was public action deliberately taken to encourage the creation of stable, affordable, middle-income housing in the heart of the city.
But that stability didn't last forever, did it?
No. Decades later, in the mid-2000s real estate boom, Stuyvesant Town became the ultimate symbol of speculative excess. A private equity firm bought it for a record-breaking price, betting they could massively increase rents and convert units to condos.
And how did that work out?
It ended in a spectacular default, one of the biggest commercial real estate failures ever. But even before the financial collapse, the attempt to rapidly raise rents displaced scores of long-term middle-class residents, completely undermining the original purpose of the development.
And the irony there was who funded the purchase.
Right. That's the really poignant part. A lot of the money for that speculative purchase came from pension funds, funds representing teachers, city workers, union members.
So the retirement funds of middle-class workers were essentially financing a deal that was pushing other middle-class workers out of their homes.
Exactly. It's a stark illustration of how an affordable haven, even one created with deliberate public policy, can become a target for speculation, and how market forces, if unchecked, can unravel the social fabric. It really highlights why understanding the history and the regulatory environment of a place matters.
It also underlines the importance of understanding why market conditions are what they are, not just accepting them at face value. There's an anecdote about that, right? An investor looking at rents.
Yes, a great example of looking deeper. This investor was considering a property where the current rents seemed unusually low for the area, for the market.
So most people might have passed thinking it was underperforming.
Right, but this investor dug into the why. They realized that, at that specific moment, gas prices were extremely high, which was temporarily making commutes from that particular neighborhood less attractive. It was pushing potential renters towards closer in, maybe more expensive areas, just for that moment.
So the low rents weren't a permanent feature, but a temporary blip caused by gas prices.
Exactly. The investor understood the underlying demand for affordable housing in that area was still strong and predicted that as gas prices inevitably moderated, demand would snap back.
So they bought it even with the low current rents.
They did. They negotiated a good price based on those temporary low rents. And sure enough, shortly after closing, as gas prices eased, demand surged, and they were able to rent the property for significantly more than the previous owner had been getting.
And because they bought it right, understanding the why, they could make it work financially.
Yeah, the story goes they were able to leverage it heavily, I think borrowing even more than the purchase price to cover closing costs and still generate positive cash flow because the eventual rent covered the higher debt service. That's the power of understanding the underlying dynamics, not just surface-level market rent.
That really connects to a bigger idea, that maybe we shouldn't just passively wait for the market to give us appreciation or rent bumps. We should be looking to create value.
Absolutely. That's a key theme for wealth building in real estate. You don't just buy and hope. You look for ways to actively improve the property or its income potential.
Like the story of William Nickerson.
He's a classic example from the mid-20th century. Wrote a famous book about it, started with almost nothing, supposedly just $1,000, and built a multi-million-dollar portfolio over about 16 years.
How? By timing the market perfectly.
Not primarily. His strategy was about actively creating value, buying properties that needed work, fixing them up strategically, improving management, increasing rents appropriately, and then using the increased equity cash flow to trade up to larger properties. It was a continuous cycle of value creation.
So how can an average person apply that today? What's a practical way to create value in a neighborhood you choose?
One common and often effective strategy mentioned is what some call upgrade hacking, particularly focusing on functional improvements that match market demand.
Like adding a bedroom.
That's probably the most powerful example. If you can legally and physically convert, say, a two-bedroom house into a three-bedroom house, you often unlock significant value because three-bedroom homes typically command a higher price and rent in most markets.
In the source notes, it works better going from 2 to 3 than 1 to 2?
Generally, yes. The jump in utility and appeal from 2 to 3 bedrooms is often greater. This could involve finishing a basement room to code, partitioning a very large living area smartly, or converting an attic space if it meets height and safety requirements.
So it's about adding functional square footage or utility that buyers or renters value.
Exactly. But creating value isn't just about big renovations. It's also about the details, the presentation. And this applies whether you're going to live there yourself or rent it out or sell it. You have to practice emotional distance.
What do you mean by emotional distance?
You have to try and take your personal preferences, your specific taste, out of the equation when you're assessing or preparing a property for the market, or even for appraisal.
Hard to do if it's your home.
It is. But the goal isn't to create your perfect dream space. The goal is to transform the house into a product that appeals strongly to the most likely buyers or renters in that specific neighborhood.
So you need to understand who those buyers are and what they want.
Precisely. You need to, metaphorically, insert the statistically probable buyer's taste into the home. You want their immediate emotional reaction upon walking in to be positive, to feel like this could be mine.
And simple things like paint color can make a difference there.
Huge difference. The example given is kitchen paint color. If you choose a cold, slightly greenish yellow, it might feel institutional, sterile, off-putting on a subconscious level.
Makes us a negative vibe.
Right. But if you choose a warm yellow, maybe with just a hint of orange, it can feel sunny, inviting, cozy, welcoming. It generates that positive emotional resonance. It's about understanding the psychology of appeal for your target audience in that location.
So it's the combination. Finding the right location whose deep forces you understand, and then presenting a product, the house that resonates with the likely inhabitants of that location.
That's the formula. Understand the macro forces shaping the neighborhood. Do your micro due diligence on the specific property, and then tailor the product to maximize its appeal within that context.
Okay, so wrapping this up, what does this all really mean for someone listening, someone trying to choose a place? It sounds like the right location isn't just about liking the street. It's the one where you've done the homework, where you understand those deeper forces, the economic trends, the social history, the structural realities, maybe even better than the average person looking there.
I think that's right. You're looking for a community that Yes, fits your personal needs, commute, schools, lifestyle, but also one where you either see a clear path to creating value yourself, like Nickerson, or where you understand the market trajectory well enough to feel confident in its stability or appreciation potential.
Which brings us back maybe to that Stuyvesant Town example and the role of policy. We saw how deliberate public action using eminent domain, freezing taxes, was used to create that initial affordability and stability.
A very different approach than just letting the market rip.
Exactly. And it leaves us with a really provocative question, I think, especially today when we hear so much about market solutions. As you look at neighborhoods, as you consider the forces of speculation, this great inversion pushing people around, is that kind of intentional public action, that regulatory intervention, sometimes necessary? Is it maybe the only way to ensure that our cities and neighborhoods can maintain some level of affordability and social stability for everyone, not just the highest bidders, in the face of powerful market forces?
It's a really fundamental question about what we want our communities to be.
Mm.
Something definitely worth thinking about long after this deep dive ends.